Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Malik Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alaihim. Ghairil maghdubi alaihim waladdallin. Amen. May Allah make it easy for us. May Allah guide us throughout this session. Thank you very much.
So next we'll have a short recitation of the glorious Quran by Dr. Karima Bashir. Dr. Karima Bashir, please.
ربنا واجعلنا مسلمين لك ومن ذريتنا أمة مسلمة لك وأرنا مناسكنا وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم ربنا وابعث فيهم رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياتك ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة ويزكيهم إنك أنت العزيز الحكيم ومن يرغب عن ملة إبراهيم إلا من سفه نفسه ولقد اصطفيناه في الدنيا وإنه في الآخرة لمن الصالحين إذ قال له ربه أسلم قال أسلمت لرب العالمين ووصى بها إبراهيم بنيه ويعقوب يا بني إن الله اصطفى لكم الدين فلا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون أم كنتم شهداء إذ حضر يعقوب الموت إذ قال لبنيه ما تعبدون من بعدي قالوا نعبد إلهك وإله آبائك إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق إلها واحدا ونحن له مسلمون تلك أمة قد خلت لها ما كسبت ولكم ما كسبتم ولا تسألون عما كانوا يعملون صدق الله العظيم.
Allahu Akbar. Jazakillahu khairan, Dr. Karima. May Allah increase you in knowledge and understanding. Thank you very much for the recitation. So we'll now hand over to the Amir of UPM-AFRIM for the recitation and introduction of our erudite guest lecturer for today's lecture. Your turn, Amir, sir.
So thank you, Dr. Aminat. And Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Indeed, it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to our today's session. Honestly, today's talk will focus on the leadership crisis and the quest for good governance in Nigeria, the Islamic perspective. Indeed, this topic is very timely and most appropriate because it has come at a time when Nigeria is facing a general election. So there is a need for such guidance, and Alhamdulillah, in our midst, we have the presence of one of the most distinguished personnel and a mentor and a role model, our father, in person of Professor Salisu Shehu. So the choosing the guest speaker is deliberate because he's most deserving for today's lecture. Professor Salisu Shehu does not need any introduction because his scholarly contributions has cut across not only the length and breadth of Africa, but also many other countries in the world. So because of this, UPM-AFRIM decided to invite Prof to share his wealth of knowledge and experience, and which will serve as a template for not only Africans, but other part of the world in choosing good leaders, because leadership, providing a good leadership is very paramount for any successful society, because preaching and what have you, the preachers will be limited, but leaders will have a good responsibility to discharge if we actually choose the rightful leadership. So let me quickly give a brief, or let me say a summary of the Prof portfolio. Professor Salisu Shehu is an international scholar whose scholarly contributions is pervasive, not only in Africa, but also in many countries in the world. He is a professor of educational psychology and a religious leader. He is presently the Vice Chancellor of Al-Istiqama University, Sumaila, Kano State, Nigeria, and a Deputy Secretary General of the Nigerian Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs. He is also the Executive Secretary of the Islamic Forum of Nigeria and the immediate past National Coordinator of the International Institute of Islamic Thought. So, Prof, you are highly welcome. Together with him, we have two discussants. One of them is Malam Umar Musa, who is a PhD scholar in the International University of Malaysia. And also, he is a lecturer with Bauchi State University. And we have Malam Aisar Fagi, who is a journalist and a media expert and an editor in one of the Nigerian dailies, that is the Daily Reality. And is also a lecturer with the Kano State Polytechnic. So I most appreciate them because the invitation was sent to them very late, and Alhamdulillah, they have accepted that. So we appreciate you all. The modalities for the presentation, Prof, for his main presentation, the time allocated to that is between 40 to 50 minutes, while each discussant will have 10 minutes for his contributions. So without taking much of your time, I would like to invite Professor Salisu Shehu for the proper presentation. Professor, you are highly welcome. Before Prof starts, please can we all mute our microphone so that to avoid any interference? Oh, yes, the slide is with me. Let me share it, sir.
Betul. Entah celaka. Agak je.
Please, can we mute
Minus.
all our microphones? Can you see the screen, please?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. But I hope maybe you can make it full screen for us.
Yes, it is full screen.
Yes, we can, sir.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm sorry I lost my connection. I had to reconnect again. So I completely missed the speech of the Amir.
It's okay, sir.
Yes, I'm sorry. You know the problem here in Nigeria about connectivity.
Absolutely, sir.
Well, it's part of the leadership, it's part of the manifestations of the leadership crisis. Unfortunately.
Absolutely, sir.
Yes. So am I being expected to start presenting?
Yes, sir. For a while, I am the one admitting the people, so I don't know if I can send the slide to one of our members to share the screen.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Thank you, sir.
That's no problem. Yeah. Are we good to go?
Yes, sir.
But the screen sharing is not showing.
Okay, so Dr. Suleiman?
Yes, Doc.
I have sent you this.
I'm listening.
Can you share it with us?
Okay. All right, let me check my email.
No, the WhatsApp, on WhatsApp. We are sorry about that, please.
Is he having problem accessing the slides? So
let me confirm. Dr. Suleiman?
Because Because he was mentioning email and you said WhatsApp. He didn't hear you.
Okay, let me still talk to him. Sorry, sir.
He's saying that he had requested it to be shared through email, not WhatsApp.
I sought an indication that he has seen the message on WhatsApp.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. If he's having problem sharing the screen, can
Yes, sir.
you shift the admitting of people to somebody and then you share since you started sharing it?
Unfortunately, okay, Alhamdulillah, he's sharing now.
Okay.
We are so sorry about that, Prof.
No. I should also be sorry about that because I should share the screen from my own end, but because I'm using a telephone, it may
No
not be
problem, sir.
possible for me to, yeah.
So, Alhamdulillah, you can go ahead for the proper presentation, Prof.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ به تعالى من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فهو المهتدي ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره الكافرون صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري وحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي وبعد. The Amir of the Africa Muslim students in UPM, that is University Putra, Malaysia, and the other members of the Executive Council, the entire leadership, and members of the University Putra Africa Muslim Students Forum, other brothers and sisters that have joined us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I should begin by thanking the Africa Muslim Forum of the University Putra Malaysia for first of all organizing this lecture, and secondly for honoring me by inviting me to present this lecture. I am so much humbled. I don't feel that I am the most deserving to make a presentation on leadership, but I will just try to make my best. I don't believe that I'm going to say all that should be said regarding this. I'm happy I have seen discussants that will actually complement, they will fill in gaps, they will add value to the presentation. The two persons I have seen very resourceful persons in their own right. I believe they will enrich the presentation, inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala. We are going to discuss a very important thing. Leadership is one of the most important things in human communities in human history and in human life. Let me say that rational leadership, leadership based on rationality, is one of the distinguishing factors between the human and animal community. I'm saying that leadership based on rationality. But then we would need to note the importance of leadership when we, understand the fact that even in animal communities, there is leadership. There is leadership and authority. There is leadership and followership. But then in animal communities, leadership and followership is instinctive, not based on rationality. But however, the fact that even based on instincts, there is leadership among animal communities, that underscores the importance of leadership in life. And I think the Quran told us about this in Surah 27, that is Surah An-Namli, where Allah stated at the beginning of the surah, gave us the story of the ant, the queen ant, that was the leader of the ant, warning its followers to beware of Suleiman's host. وقالت نملة يا أيها النمل ادخلوا مساكنكم لا يحطمنكم سليمان وجنوده هم لا يشعرون. O fellow ants, withdraw to your abodes, so that you would not be smashed by Suleiman and his host while they do not know. So this means that even in animal communities there is leadership, but that is based on instinct. So in human communities, leadership is based on rationality, based on reasoning, because Allah has gave us the power of reasoning. Allah says, وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ وَإِنَّا خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِن نُطْفَةٍ أَمْشَاجٍ وَجَعَلْنَاهُ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا إِنَّا هَدَيْنَاهُ السَّبِيلَ إِمَّا شَاكِرًا وَإِمَّا كَفُورًا. So we've been given the power to reason. Now, therefore, leadership is a very important thing in life. And throughout human history, human communities that are civilized existed, under leadership. It is only barbaric communities that are barbaric, that went so low, even below animals, living like, living a jungle life without leadership. But civilized communities have always existed under leadership. That tells us that leadership is a very important thing. Leadership is important because, as it were, the fate and the destiny of communities largely depend on the kind of leadership in the community. So the fate of communities is made with good leadership, and the fate of a community or its destiny is marred with bad leadership. So you can see that the survival of communities, but not just ordinary survival, but survival that is prosperous survival in human communities is based on leadership. So communities that are doomed are communities that have never had leadership. So we're therefore addressing a very important thing, the issue of leadership. In Nigeria, unfortunately, we have been faced with leadership crisis. But I would advise that the host mute all participants so that we will not be getting interfering voices.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me continue. In Nigeria, unfortunately, I've been saying that I'm on the okay. I'm now on the fourth slide. I'm on the fourth slide. All right. Right, that's where we are. I said there are facts that attest to the fact that we have been groping under leadership crisis in Nigeria for a number of years. And there are proofs. Some of these proofs that attest to the fact that we have been living under leadership crisis include: number one, the prevailing conditions of backwardness, excruciating poverty, decay in infrastructure, energy crisis, endemic corruption, and fraud, and complete system failure, overwhelming insecurity, widespread indiscipline, and you can as well say institutionalization of impunity, a state of apathy and uncertainty, and etc., in our, which have all characterized our national life, are attestations to the fact that we have been living under serious leadership crisis. Now, all these conditions are not supposed to be with us in Nigeria, because we're not supposed to be backward. Allah has enriched this country with abundant human and natural resources, sufficient enough to make us a prosperous country. But unfortunately, because of poor leadership, we are backward. We've not been able to overcome energy crisis. In this world of disruptive technology, where our countries that are almost at par with us have gone to all extent in terms of development, we are still grappling with the problem of energy crisis in the country. We're still struggling to feed ourselves. Now, these are unfortunate proofs of the fact that we have crisis of leadership. We can refer to statements made by leaders at different times, or by some thinkers or writers at different times, that attest to the fact that there is crisis of leadership in the country and poor governance. There is the popular or famous statement made by the late, writer and popular literalist, that is Professor Chinua Achebe, when he asserted that the one and only problem with Nigeria is the problem of leadership. In his Sardauna lecture, memorial lecture, which used to be organized annually by Arewa House, in 1999, that was way, a few years before he joined partisan politics, President Muhammadu Buhari, then General Muhammadu Buhari, was the presenter of the lecture, and he asserted at that time that it is manifestly clear that there is today a dearth of leadership everywhere. Yes, dearth of leadership everywhere. You take every sector, you take the political space, that is the general leadership in terms of political leadership at the level of the federation or at the level of the state, and at the level of the local government. The local governments are virtually dead. They have now been killed because of selfishness in leadership at all levels. And then you take it also at institutional levels, in our institutions, even in our religious organizations, there is leadership crisis. There are problems even in our Islamic organizations. There are cases of corruption and fraud. So leadership crisis has come to penetrate, has pervaded all aspects of our life, unfortunately. And indeed, even at the microscopic level, level of domestic leadership, in our homes, there is leadership crisis. Fathers have abdicated their responsibility of fatherhood, and so on and so forth. At local community leadership levels, there is crisis. So actually, like it has been cited by different persons, there is crisis of leadership. Lately, describing the selfish nature of leadership in the country and how it has turned out into collective robbery. Leadership has turned into collective robbery, fraud, misrule, and tyranny. Malam Liman Churoma asserts that ours has become a leadership or ruled by forums, governance forum. Together, they perpetuate corruption and perpetuate it. That forum, this forum, which ensures collective robbery as it has been put. They rob the nation collectively because the governors have blocked all the possibility of giving autonomy to the local governments. As a forum, they have been able to block it, and they have been able to kill the local governments. The Algon has become, weak. It can no longer do anything. So in actual fact, there is a real problem. Sometimes also, describing the moral leprosy that characterizes leadership in our country, in his column, Malam Adamu asserts that ours is a country whose conscience is on leave. It's like our conscience, individually and collectively, is on leave, is no longer with us. So on social justice, social inequality and corruption, Malam Ibrahim says, certain people, mostly a tiny minority, who are relatives of those in power, or who are born into the families of those who matter, or who hang on to those who have means, are allowed virtually unlimited access to wealth and privileges, while the majority of the population are impoverished and dispossessed through a systematic and political state policy. Now, this is affirming the fact that this poor leadership we have been grappling with in the country has kept on, broadening the gap of inequality in the country, such that virtually you can say that the country has been divided into two worlds. The worlds of the rich, who can afford everything, the world of the privilege either through, leadership, whether aristocratic or democratic leadership, or through professional expertise in some way, or some other privileges, and the world of the poor that are increasingly being impoverished. He further says, a nation is unjust and tyrannical if it deliberately closes the door of intellectual and moral development to some children, simply because their parents are poor and are of no consequence. Denial of education to a child is perhaps the gravest and most far-reaching of all social injustices. We have found ourselves in a situation whereby our leadership failure in the country has reached an extent that you see millions of children are now being deprived of education. Like I said, the gap of inequality keeps on widening, and this gap is more disturbing when you look at our educational indices in the north. We are being confronted by quadruple jeopardy due to poor leadership at the state levels especially. Our governors are killing our states. They are killing our societies. Now, the poor enrollment of children in schools in most of northern states, this phenomenon of out-of-school children is not being mitigated. It has kept on increasing because of a number of factors. Because of poverty that is being aggravated by poor leadership again, and because of selfish leadership. So many children are increasingly dropping out of school or are increasingly even not being enrolled in schools. But then, like I said in one forum just recently, we have been so much talking about out of school children. What we haven't paid attention to, which has also become very, very, prevalent, especially in northern states, is schools without teachers. There are no teachers in most of our schools at the primary and secondary levels. In most of the states, governors have not been recruiting teachers. Teachers have been retiring. In almost every month, a teacher or two is retiring in our states. Almost on monthly basis, one teacher or another may retire. But then there are states whereby for nearly 10 years, teachers have not been recruited. Even if they have been recruited very minimally. Very recently, when I made this post on the social media, I was told that only Kaduna State recently employed 10,000 teachers. But in most of the states, there is a state around here that employed 1,000 teachers, but it has not posted the teachers up to now. Now, you go to many schools in northern Nigeria, in most states in northern Nigeria, you find only the principal and one or two teachers, or you find only the headmaster at the primary school without any teacher in the school, or with only one teacher. And in most cases, you find only voluntary teachers here and there that come to the school at will and leave at will. Now, these are all because of poor leadership. There is almost total or near collapse of the education system and infrastructure. And then this have come all the more to be aggravated by examination malpractice, or this situation is aggravating examination malpractice, whereby you hardly find any school. We are living in a situation of irony because of poor leadership. You find that in the public schools there are no teachers, but the principals are always required to turn out students that pass their own GCE or NECO. There are no teachers, but principals are expected to present good result of their students. So the only thing is so you can see examination malpractice has come to be institutionalized. It has come to be accepted as a norm, all because of poor leadership. And the unfortunate thing is that a vicious cycle has already been set in. The vicious cycle that has already been set in is that, you see, products of examination malpractice are already becoming teachers in secondary schools and in primary schools and even in universities. Products of examination malpractice are now local government chairmen, state assembly parliamentarians, and even governors. People who, partook in examination malpractice to make it. A vicious cycle has set in the country. Now it has sunk the country into deeper leadership crisis. These are some of the unfortunate manifestations of our leadership crisis. Professor Samaluko at one time submits that and pen robbery have become everyday occurrences in our country that no longer disturb our conscience. They no longer disturb our conscience because they have become everyday stories. Looting in public treasury started with single digits. 5 naira stolen, 9 naira stolen, it went into double digits. 18 naira stolen, 20 naira, 58 naira, 97 naira. Then it went into triple digits. 150 naira stolen, 200 naira stolen, 300 naira, and then it went into quadruple digits. It kept growing and metamorphosing. Now, stealing in our country is not even in billions, it's happening in trillions. In trillions. And therefore, this has become a daily occurrence that it no longer disturbs our collective conscience. You are no longer pricked when you hear that billions of souls have been stolen. This is the most unfortunate situation we have found ourselves. The subversion of economic means and ends has turned life in the Nigerian society upside down to the extent that certain criminal acts are no longer condemned by our collective conscience. Like I was saying, stealing started in single digits. So when you hear today that somebody has stolen 5,000, you don't even give a damn to it, or even 50, you don't even give it. In fact, when you hear somebody has stolen 500,000, you don't even give a damn to it, because stealing is now happening in billions. It no longer disturbs our collective conscience. This is unfortunate. I know I don't have luxury of time, but in the next slide, I try to compare the present situation with the one that was made by Shehu Danfode, which led him to partake in a revolution, a sort of jihad. He says in Kitab al-Farq, one of the ways of their governments, that is Kitab al-Farq, is a book in which he compared Muslim leadership and leadership of infidels. He said in Muslim leadership, social justice is the norm, but in leadership of infidels, oppression, tyranny, and dictatorship is the norm. So he said one of the ways of their governments, that is infidels, is they're intentionally eating whatever food they wish, whether it is religiously permitted or forbidden, and wearing whatever clothes they wish, whether religiously permitted or forbidden, and drinking whatever beverages they wish, whether religiously permitted or forbidden, and riding whatever riding beasts they wish, whether religiously permitted or forbidden, and taking whatever women they wish without marriage contract, and living in decorated places, whether religiously permitted or forbidden, and spreading soft carpets as they wish, whether religiously permitted or forbidden. Now compare this and our own political class and see what is happening. You would confirm the fact that our situation is really very terrible. In terms of issues of justice, Sheikh Usman Danfodio said one of the ways of their government, which is also well known, is that if you have an adversary at law and he precedes you to them and gives them some money, then your word will not be accepted by them, even though they know for a fact of your truthfulness, unless you give them more than your adversary gave, more than what your adversary gave. So justice is for the highest bidder. One of the ways of their government is the shutting of the door. They shut the door in the face of the needy. So justice is for the highest bidder, and the poor can never have access to them. There is no way the voice of the poor can be heard in such kind of situation. This is our own situation. Now, looking at the issue globally, you can say in a way, and especially in the African context, you can say that there is leadership even at the global level, and especially at the African situation. And this has been asserted by many scholars and writers. Humanity has been thrown into misery today because of the ubiquity of bad governance, oppression, and tyranny in most parts of the world. Across the countries and communities in the world today, a tiny minority has illegitimately impose itself over the vast majority and against all proper ways of leadership, and through all corrupt and tyrannical practices, they perpetuate themselves in power. Bad governance, therefore, has become the order of the day, especially in the third world. The specific Nigerian picture of bad governance was also graphically presented earlier. But even in the so-called advanced democracies, the world has in recent times witnessed how the leaders drag their countries into unjustified, greed-driven, meaningless and wicked wars without prior consultation and approval or of their people. This sordid situation is the reason behind prevailing campaigns against or advocacy for good governance and popularization of the term. This fact was attested to by the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific when it said that recently the terms governance and good governance are being increasingly used in development literature. Bad governance is being increasingly regarded as one of the root causes of all evil in our society. This assertion was further reinforced by Hassan and Young when they said issues of good governance are being widely discussed and debated the world over. There is a flurry of activity to better understand not only the social, economic, and political imperatives that underpin the nature and purpose of good governance, but also to appreciate the cultural sources and traditions which have contributed to and influenced the way we govern societies and manage our businesses. So what is good governance? In Islam, the term good governance is not new or strange as it may well be in Western or conventional literature. The Islamic term of good governance, or the term that represents good governance in Islam, is as-siyasa ash-shar'iyya. This term may be seen mentioned severally in this paper, referring to its usage in the writings of the Sokoto Jihad leaders, or even as titles of books written on leadership and governance, as in the case of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. That is the book, his book, as-siyasa ash-shar'iyya fi islahi ra'i wa ra'iyya. Obviously, therefore, the definition and major characteristics of good governance as given by UNESCO are exactly the central issues in all Islamic literature on the subject of good governance. By way of illustration, UNESCO explained that good governance has 8 major characteristics as follows. That number 1, it is participatory, it is consensus-oriented, it is accountable, transparent, responsive, effective and efficient, equitable and inclusive, and it follows the rule of law. This is very important. It follows the rule of law. It assures that corruption is minimized and the views of minorities are taken into account, and that the voices of the most vulnerable in the society are heard in decision making. Good governance is also responsive to the present and future needs of society. Now, if you take this, you can see that in the Islamic perspective, all the above definition of good governance is even narrow, even though acceptable. All those features that have been identified are all encapsulated in the Islamic concept of good governance. But they are by no means, however, the only essential elements or components of good governance from the Islamic perspective. Because of the secular background of the organization UNESCO that gave the definition, there is a fundamental omission that can be observed. What is the fundamental omission? There are certain very important components in the Islamic point of view that have not been included in that definition. These are the fact that in addition to the 8 characteristics given by UNESCO, good governance in Islam necessarily, and underline the word I say necessarily, necessarily entails proclaiming and establishing the supremacy and sovereignty of Allah and His laws and the enforcement of those laws, establishing worship unto Allah, salat, zakat, etc., and enjoining righteousness and moral conduct, and prohibiting evil conducts, abomination, and all sorts of vices and immoralities like usury or interest, bribes, stealing, dishonesty, injustice, prostitution, homosexuality, lesbianism, and abortion. You can see that in Islamic concept of good governance, LGBTs don't have a place in the Islamic concept of good governance. The issue of giving LGBTs their rights or LGBTQ their rights does not even arise, because in the Islamic definition of good governance, Amru bil ma'aruf wa nahyu anil munkar is a very essential, or you can say a central feature in Islamic concept of good governance. So in observing these injunctions or prohibiting these evils, the views of minorities who want to live by those vices, like prostitutes or gays or lesbians, would not be listened to, talk less of recognizing or respecting those views. Because Allah says in the Quran, الَّذِينَ إِمَّكَّنَّاهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ أَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَوُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَأَمَرُوا بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَنَهَوْا عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَلِلَّهِ عَاقِبَةُ الْأُمُورِ. So Amru bil Ma'aruf and Nahy anil Munkar is an important, is a very important, no, is a primary obligation of leadership and governance in Islam. Unless these are observed in governance, it cannot be considered as fully good as far as Islam is concerned. In the explanations of the meaning of as-siyasa ash-shari'iyya, that is good governance, by both Sheikh Usman Danfodio and Ibn Taymiyyah, these essential elements are very clearly mentioned. This is another fundamental difference. This is a fundamental difference between the Islamic approach to leadership and governance and the Western secular approach to leadership and governance. So good governance is the essence of politics in Islam. That is to say, as-siyasa ash-shari'iyya is the essence of politics in Islam. If politics would not be, undertaken for the purposes of entrenching or engendering good governance, one should not partake in politics. In Diya'us Siyasat, Sheikh Usman bin Fodio says that rendering and dispensing justice is the essence of politics in Islam, and that if one were not going to observe justice, he then should never partake in politics. In order to illustrate this, Sheikh Usman bin Fodio says, and I quote, he says, take note that siyasa, politics, is of two kinds. He says, zalima, there is siyasa zalima, unjust and illegitimate, which is prohibited by the Sharia, and adila, that is siyasa adila, just and legitimate politics that procures people's rights from the unjust and the wicked, and also sanctions or reprimands the perpetrators of corruption and evil. It obliges that part of the latter, that is type of politics, because avoiding it results in neglect of people's rights and abandoning of the Sharia. That is to say, partaking in siyasa adila is wajib. To partake in siyasa adila is wajib. And to partake in siyasa zalima is haram. It is haram because he says it leads to opening the door of wrongdoing and injustice, bloodshed, and acquisition of wealth, and unlawfully looting the public treasury. So it is haram to partake in this kind of politics. So any politician that partakes in corruption is continuously and perpetually, living in haram and partaking in haram and promoting haram and boosting haram and entrenching haram in the society. And people who avoid participating in politics, who are good and who have good intention, are abandoning wajib, and they are letting the space for people who will promote evil in the society. That is why he says, partaking in siyasa adila is wajib, while partaking in siyasa zalima is haram. However, it must be stated that partaking in siyasa adila is wajib, but not fardu ain. It's fardu kifaya. It's a vicarious obligation. A vicarious obligation in the sense that some people must offer themselves to politics and leadership for the purposes of entrenching good governance. People of good character must offer themselves to politics and leadership, and I mean for the purpose of entrenching good governance. These are things that are very obvious, as stated by Sheikh Usman Namfodio. It's a pity. I know we don't have luxury of time. I have taken nearly 40 minutes talking. I may not be able to perhaps present the slides one after the other. I have about 61 slides, and I'm just somewhere around less than 20. So let me just quickly go to the last part of my, let me just show the slides quickly. In the next slide, I try to make the point that transparency and accountability in public responsibility and leadership are the hallmark of good governance. To be accountable and to be transparent in public responsibility and leadership are the hallmark of good governance. These are all the points I've tried to present here. And then this has been discussed extensively. I have spoken about the issues of corruption and how to fight corruption. And then another point is delegation of authority based on merit and supervision are the cornerstones of leadership and governance. That is to say, when you are delegating authority, appointing ministers or appointing commissioners or appointing permanent secretaries or appointing directors, you must, a leader must observe the principle of, siyasa adila, that is appointing people on merit. Appointing people on merit is the hallmark of good governance, and appointing people on favoritism or on partiality or on nepotism or whatever form of other thing is partaking in bad governance, is promotion of bad governance. In fact, it is breach of amana. It is breach of amana, because when you appoint people that do not deserve positions, people that do not qualify for positions, and people who don't merit certain positions, even if it is appointment, like the situation whereby local government chairmen are appointing their children and their cronies who do not even have certificates, they appoint them as primary school teachers. Or when you appoint unqualified persons for certain positions, that is breach of amana. That is the amana which Allah has spoken in Surah An-Nisa. وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تُؤَدُّوا الْأَمَانَاتِ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهَا. And this is actually what destroys nations. It's actually what destroys nations. When an emperor of the Sassanid dynasty that collapsed was asked, what is it that brought down your dynasty? He said, when we appointed lowly people to high positions, when we began to appoint lowly people to high positions, that was how our dynasty was brought down. Any nation that does not respect merit is partaking in corruption and impunity and is not respecting the rule of law, and the nation is prone to, to collapse and to decline. Now, further, I have talked about the process and obligations of engendering good governance in the society. The slides are going to be shared. You can see them. I just want to move to the end of the presentation so that I will address some practical issues. Now I said way back and way towards the end of the slides, addressing the leadership crisis in Nigeria. How would we address the leadership crisis from a practical perspective? Let us first of all talk about qualities of leadership and public work from the Quranic perspective. We will just, scholars that have written on leadership had actually presented a number of qualities of leadership. But I've limited my discussion now here, looking at only some few Quranic verses from which I extracted certain qualities of leadership as given in the Quran. Leadership and public work. Mind you, leadership and public work. By public work, I mean, the civil service, for example, and any political appointment, whether as commissioners, whether as permanent secretaries, directors, director generals, executive secretaries, as it were, executive chairman in some commissions and agencies, and then also, leadership at the local government level, civil servants, local government employees, and all these are public work. So put together, the Quran has given us certain qualities that must be observed. Number one, trustworthiness. Trustworthiness in leadership. The Quran has given us this and knowledge, trustworthiness and knowledge. And knowledge here, we must make sure that knowledge here, we must accept the fact that it's referring to religious knowledge, professional competence, and expertise. This came in Surah Yusuf, chapter 12, verse 55. When Yusuf was brought out of the prison, and he says, Ij'alni ala khaza'in al-ardi, appoint me on the treasures of the land. Inni hafizun alim. Inni hafizun. I'm trustworthy. I can protect it. Alim. And I'm knowledgeable. That is competent. Knowledgeable, religious knowledge. And also he has the professional expertise and competence to take accounts, to record accounts, and so on and so forth. So trustworthiness and knowledge. Knowledge meaning professional, religious knowledge, professional knowledge, and expertise. All this must be observed in the selection of leaders. Leaders must have such qualities. Another thing which the Quran has told us about leadership is physical fitness and knowledge also, which include good health, energy, stamina, and physical fitness. And this came actually in Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah told us the story of Talut. ألم تر إلى ملأ من بني إسرائيل من بعد موسى إذ قالوا لنبي له مبعث لنا ملكا نقاتل في سبيل الله قال هل عصيتم إن كتب عليكم القتال ألا تقاتلوا قالوا وما لنا, up to the point where إن الله قد بعث لكم طالوت ملكا قالوا أن يكون له الملك علينا ونحن أحق بالملك منه ولم يؤت سعة من المال قال إن الله اصطفاه عليكم وزاده بسطة في العلم والجسم والله يؤتي ملكه من يشاء والله واسع عليم. When Allah told them Talut has been appointed as their leader, they protested and said, how would he have been their leader when he was the lowly among them? But Allah said Allah had made him their leader, and he had empowered his capacity. He has developed his capacity in terms of physical fitness and knowledge. He had empowered him with physical fitness and knowledge. These two are very essential in leadership. And then, with the particular reference to public work and public responsibility, one thing is some other things that are important is delegation of authority, assignment of tasks and duties to people that must be competent and trustworthy. When you are going to, as a leader, when you are going to appoint people into positions, you must make sure that they fit these qualities, that they are competent and they are trustworthy. And we see that in the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam, when he was trying to assign somebody to the task of bringing the throne of Bilqis. إفريت من الجن قال إفريت من الجن سآتيك به. He say, I will bring it to you. وإني عليه لقوي أمين أنا آتيك به من قبل أن تقوم من مقامك وإني عليه قبل أن تقوم من مقامك وإني عليه لقوي أمين. And in discharging that, I am qawi, competent. I am competent. I mean, and I'm trustworthy. So when appointing people as permanent secretaries, or appointing people as DGs, or appointing people into any positions, leaders must ensure that such persons are competent and as also they are trustworthy. Now, what about practical measures of addressing the crisis of leadership? I have just tried to come up with some practical suggestions. Number one, we need to revisit or overhaul the leadership recruitment and selection process. We should revisit the constitutional provisions. Just simply saying that if a person has, secondary school certificate, is qualified to contest for certain positions, just totally relying on paper qualification. Of course, from the laws have provided that a person must not have been convicted by court of law and other things. But I am saying that we must revisit this, even the paper qualification needs to be revisited. And even if we should subject, people to some form of aptitude test for the purpose of selection, I think that should be, that is very important. But then, not just the issue of intellectual capacity or knowledge capacity, but values also matter. So we should broaden the qualification for leadership. Some aspects of values must be brought in. Persons' moral uprightness in the society must be taken into consideration. We should broaden the stakeholder inputs. We should deepen community participation or expand community participation in the selection. That is to say, our leadership selection and recruitment process, we need to overhaul it. We need to revisit it. So I'm saying that we should look critically and see how would we broaden community participation, stakeholder participation in the selection of leaders. Should that only be left to, professional politicians that are the so-called delegates who have made politics their way of life? Where are you going? Politics. Where have you come from? Politics. Where do you think about politics? What do you dream about? Politics. What do you eat? Politics. What do you drink? Politics. People who have made this kind of politics this way to be the only people that are left to select leaders for us. This is very terrible. We should broaden stakeholder participation. And I'm not in position, we need to sit down on a round table and discuss how would we broaden stakeholder participation in the recruitment and selection of leaders in our society, because this thing is becoming too much. We always turn in, we're always producing leaders that are terribly bad, from bad to worse and from worse to worse. I think this is something that we need to think about. And then we should find more powerful and effective measures of curbing money politics. More powerful and more effective measures of curbing money politics. We know how it has become. Now we know, it is for the highest bidder. We have seen what happened in all the primaries. Those who have paid higher, are the ones that eventually emerge as the flag bearers of all the political parties. And this is quite unfortunate. Unless we address this matter, we cannot do away with this leadership crisis. And finally, I believe that what I have stated may be in the short and medium term, but in the long term, we need to institute leadership training at all levels. government should institutionalize leadership training at all educational levels. We should institute leadership training at the primary school level to catch them young, and at the secondary school level. Of course, national values has been introduced. A course, civic education, has always been taught right from the time when even those of us were in primary school. But I think purposely we should review what is being taught. We should purposely institute, specific courses on leadership training, leadership and social responsibility training, right from the primary school to the secondary school. This is in the long term, so that we will be consciously preparing leaders. That is in the formal setting. In the informal setting, Islamic organizations in particular, like what the MSS has been doing. MSS has been organizing leadership training programs. But I want to suggest that Muslim Student Society and other Islamic organizations should strengthen leadership training. In some Islamic organizations, even some of those Islamic organizations that are really big and have large followership are zero in terms of leadership training. They don't give leadership training at all to their people. You can see that they don't even give training on how to conduct meetings, how to take decisions, how to report, how to write reports and other things, how to conduct public speech. These are essential things that we should try. And I mean, these are just some aspects, not to talk of issues of training in terms of integrity, instilling, uprightness, moral uprightness and probity and honesty in people regarding leadership. This is very important. So Islamic organizations should create a program and strategy for inculcating amana and other leadership qualities in our people. The Ummah, in the long term, the Ummah needs to establish a leadership training institute. And we have a lot of intellectual heritage, a lot of intellectual resource base from which we can develop training manuals. If we only take the books written by the Sokoto Jihad leaders on leadership, we can develop very excellent and world-class leadership training manuals that can be used in leadership training institutes. And the leadership training institute can be established at all levels of the Ummah. And this is very important and very necessary if we have to salvage our society. So all non-government, again, government and non-governmental organizations may need to partake in value reorientation, societal reorientation, as it were. Even if a person of integrity comes out and presents himself for the purposes of partaking in politics, it is the masses that will ostracize him. The masses will denigrate him. They will say that by the coming, he doesn't have anything. So the society, the entire society needs to be orientated. We need to reorientate our people so that people will cherish integrity more than money. People will cherish, honesty and transparency more than, people that just come and give them some stipends. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وسبحانك اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Prof. Salih Shehu, for this a rich presentation. Jazakumullahu khair. And now we are moving to the discussion session, where we are going to start with Malam Umar Musa. They will try to give us a take-home message from the Prof's presentation. Indeed, he has given some of the practical issues that we will address our current challenges, especially with respect to leadership in Nigeria and beyond. So Malam Umar, the room is open for you. I wish you all the best in your deliberations. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa mawalahum bi ihsan ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum once again. I'm very much honored to attend such a lecture from an erudite scholar as Professor Salih Shehu. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to increase the rank of them in our society. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to protect him. It is indeed very difficult for a small fish like me to discuss a lengthy lecture as such, and well loaded with knowledge and insight. As you mentioned, Amir, that the Prof has mentioned very important practical steps. Before then, he has problematized our leadership crisis, and by citing so many instances. And the one I would like to add to show you how deep we are in depth of leadership, or we are in leadership deficit, and the orientation of our younger generation has deteriorated to a level that we never thought. For instance, two children were arguing in a primary school. They were arguing that my father is richer than your father. The one is telling the other. Then the other said, who is your father? Has your father been arraigned to EFCC? Has he ever been arraigned to EFCC? So his yardstick as a child was that to measure the richness of his father is when EFCC has attempted arraigning his father. So this is the level to which the psyche of our society has deteriorated. So generations are looking at leadership as a chance to loot money, as a chance to enrich themselves, regardless of whether it is legal or not, regardless of what will happen to the society. Let the society perish. They have no problem if they will enjoy their temporary lives. So Prof has problematized our leadership deficits, and he has mentioned some of the qualities of a good leader, and the most important of them is trustworthiness. And he has cited verses, the one in Surah Al-Baqarah, Inna Allah astafahu alaykum wa zadahu basatan fil ilmi wal jism. The one in Surah Yusuf, Ij'alni ala khaza'in al-ardi inni hafizun alim. And another one, there is also another one in Surah Al-Qasas, because Prof was in a haste, when the two ladies asked their father to hire Musa alayhi salam. They said, Inna khayra man ista'jarta al-qawiyyu al-amin. That the best of the persons you hire is the one who is trustworthy and strong. So trustworthiness in all the verses and in every delegation, as Prof rightly mentioned, that's not only looking at the general leadership, but even public offices. The smallest of the office you think is systematized in such a way that it can either affect or strengthen the upper echelon of the leadership. So society is systematic. And most importantly, the practical steps given by Prof, I think as if we are cut from the same cloth, as if I have seen Prof's slides, or Prof has seen my notes. He was mentioning them. If for us to change the existing status quo, I think we need a moral reorientation, value reorientation in our society, starting from our homes. There is a famous quotation, not a hadith. They said, "Kama takunu yuwalla alaykum." As you are, so your leadership are. So your leadership is. So therefore, you cannot expect you to be that cruel at family level as a father, for instance, or as a mother. You are reckless. You don't care of giving the right values to your child, and expect the leadership to be kind to you. That is not the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah used some of the wicked leaders to punish what you have done. And it's very important for us to believe that being good, keeping to Allah's commandment is what will make our leadership right. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees our mind and we are obedient to him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not let such leaders to be a kind of a torment to us. So it's very important at the micro level, at family level, at every level, we should be as much as good as possible. You cannot be a Fir'aun in your family and expect the president of Nigeria to be kind. Even if he is kind, probably those around him will be worse, will make him to lose focus. And leadership training in politics or in leadership world over, right from history, leaders are deliberately selected, and they are not. You cannot just be living without any focus and expect the best of you to be your leaders. Even the most sophisticated society in the contemporary period, as they used to cite the instances of the world powers, they used to know their leaders. A recent example is Obama. He was not right from childhood to be a president. So the leadership training that Prof has mentioned is very paramount, and we have to do it deliberately. We don't do it in the Western style. We are Muslims. We know our target, and Prof has rightly mentioned that the target of leadership is for you to establish al-amru bil ma'ruf wal nahyu 'anil munkar. Wa'ada Allahu alladhina amanu wa 'amilu s-salihati minkum la yastakhlifannahum fil ardi kama istakhlafa alladhina min qablihim wa la yumakkinanna lahum dinahum alladhi irtada lahum wa la yubaddilannahum min ba'di khawfihim amna يعبدونني لا يشركون بي شيئا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised that he will make the believers from among you who do the right thing, who do good, to surely grant them success, that is to rule over the world, as he has given that opportunity to those before them. That's the generation of the Sahaba. But the precondition is that يعبدونني لا يشركون بي شيئا. They should serve me. They should worship me. لا يشركون بي شيئا. They should not associate partners to me. And the verse the Prophet has mentioned, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, الذين إن مكناهم في الأرض أقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وأمروا بالمعروف ونهوا عن المنكر ولله عاقبة الأمور. That when you grasp leadership, what you do is you establish al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahyu 'anil munkar, establish prayer and give out charity. And this is what focused Islamic leadership does. But if you expect that we are going to see changes, we are just waiting to cast our vote. If we do that, things will continue. You will be hoping for the best, but at the end of the day, those involved in party, especially in party politics, are those people that have no focus. They are the looters we are talking about. So we should have value orientation, leadership foundations, whether at government level or non-governmental level, and we should also participate in party politics, because the mess is the second stage of the mess is the party politics. So participation in party politics, even where you have the values, you have the characteristics, you have the good leadership, but you stay home, you didn't participate in party politics, your leadership skills will lie low, and there is no benefit of having those leadership qualities. So we should try as much as possible to have a focused orientation of leaders that will participate in party politics, and at the end of the day emerge as our candidates. Because the candidates that emerge, you must choose from them. So at the end of the day, you will be given the opportunity to choose between the lesser evil, between the best, between Muslim and non-Muslim. But if you have your deliberate leaders that we are not, and they are in party politics and they emerge candidates, it's very easy. We have the numbers. Muslims are almost 70% in Nigeria. So there is no point saying we have a Muslim candidate, we have a non-Muslim candidate. I think this is enough for a highlight of what the Prof mentioned. We really thank him for this educating lecture. We hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make our society upright, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our leaders with wisdom and knowledge and the trustworthiness to move our society better and to have better generations. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Malam Musa Umar. This is really apt. You have captured what Prof has presented, and wajazakumullahu khair. And the second discussant will be Malam Aisar. Being a media expert, I believe he will also look at the social media angle upon which you can promote the good governance, as well as enlighten people on the danger of thuggery and other social vices. So with this, I invite Malam Aisar to proceed.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala ahlihi wa sahbihi wa mawala. My brothers and sisters, the organizers of this important lecture, our Malam, our mentor, our scholar, Professor Salih Show. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First and foremost, I'm very happy to be here. But at the beginning, I told the convener to excuse me from being part of this panel, because how can I join a discussion? How can I join a table with my mentor? One thing with our prof is when he talks on any issue, he leaves no room for an addition or inclusion. So what do you expect me to say on this important lecture, this August lecture, which he has given us? You heard him saying that his paper has 60-something pages. So what do you expect us to say in what he has presented? However, what must be done must be done. In his own effort to problematize the problem of our leadership, he said something. He reminds about an important question posed by political scientists on this issue, on this kind of problem, that in defining the problem, what is the problem? Is it the people who fell the system, or it is the system that fell us? In talking about this issue, I can say that it is both. Both people and the system have failed us. I have seen that in your poster of invitation. You cited the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar, which was reported by Bukhari and Muslim. The hadith that says, "Kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulin an ra'iyati," that all of you are leaders, and you will be asked about the responsibility of your leadership. Or in other words, all of you are shepherds, or all of you are guardians, and you will be asked about the trust you are entrusted with. So even if we limit ourselves to the interpretation, to the explanation of this hadith, I think we will solve 90 or 95% of our problems. The hadith goes on to mention 4 categories of people with much responsibilities. Number 1 is our leaders, where it says, فَالْإِمَامُ رَائٍ وَمَسْئُولٍ عَنْ رَئِيَّتِهِ. Secondly, it says, وَالرَّجُلُ فِي بَيْتِهِ رَائٍ وَمَسْئُولٍ عَنْ رَئِيَّتِهِ. And thirdly, it says, وَالْمَرْأَةُ فِي بَيْتِ زَوْجِهَا رَائِيَةٌ وَمَسْئُولٍ عَنْ رَئِيَّتِهَا. Then lastly, it says, وَالْكَادِمُ فِي مَالِ سَيِّدِهِ رَائٍ وَمَسْئُولٍ عَنْ رَئِيَّتِهِ. أَلَا وَكُلُّكُمْ رَائٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٍ عَنْ رَئِيَّتِهِ. Our problem is, when we are talking about the problem of leadership, our attention goes to our political office holders. We abandon all other types of leaders that we have. And if we are to count the number of our governors, the number of our senators, the number of our local government chairmen, the number of our political office holders, how many do you have? You wouldn't have more than, let's say, 10,000. Then Nigeria as a country, it has the projection of 220 million people. And if we go back to that hadith, it says all of us are leaders. And we will be asked about the responsibility of our leadership. If Prof says in his part of presentation that our educational institutions, right from the BC to the cleaner or to the securities, they are all leaders and they have their responsibilities. The question here is, how are we all discharging their responsibilities according? Security institutions, they are all leaders from the top to the bottom. The question is, are they discharging their responsibilities? We have religious leaders, we have traditional leaders. In all aspects of our endeavors, in all aspects of our affairs, we have leaders. The important question we ask ourselves, are we discharging our responsibilities? If other categories of people, forget about the leadership, we know if the main issue, if the main problem, but if other sectors of our society will discharge their responsibilities, I bet you our problem will be very, very minimal. But the issue here, we almost all, with the exception of few, fail our what? Our responsibilities. This is number one. Number two, talking about the issue of system. Talking about the issue of system. We know the system is not ours. The system is a borrowed system, is an alien, is a foreign system. But how can we adapt the system to be ours? Or how can we adjust some part of it to suit our norms and values? This reminds us about the maxim of our learned scholar, late Sheikh Abakar Mahmoud Gumi, where he said that, where he was advising his disciple or us to join the system and make it better. However, since during that time, some of his disciples, knowing how corrupt the system is, knowing how ungodly the system is, they were skeptical. They were saying that Ashiga anarchy. Gumi was saying Ashiga agara, Ashiga system agara, while some of his students or disciples were saying, looking at the nature of the system, looking at the corruption of the system, looking at the secularity of the system, they were skeptical, saying that, or thinking that, even if the good people join the system, they will only what? They will be like others, like they just join the bandwagon. Here, we must.
It's like Molan Anas is having a network issue.
Of our leadership by saying, talking about social injustice of the system. He talks about the issue of corruption. He talks about the issue of impunity, the issue of nepotism, cronyism, and collective robbery, which in summary, the political scientists call it the consensus of the elite or elite consensus. We all know that in our society, we have 5 categories of powerful people. You have politicians, you have religious elite, you have political elite, you have religious elite, you have traditional elite, you have security elite, then you have business elite. These 5 categories of people, they are the ones who decide the affairs of people. So how can we hold these people responsible to their amana, to the accountability given to them? Being a student of media or a student of communication, Section 22 of our Constitution says the press, the radio, television, and all other agencies of the mass media shall at all times be free to uphold the fundamental objectives contained in this Constitution and uphold the responsibility and accountability of the government to the people. The question here is, what is our media doing in holding these people responsible and accountable to their actions and inactions, to their promises, the promises they made during the electioneering? What are they doing? Are they discharging their social responsibility? Or they too, they are making the system, or they are making the system worse. if you look at the ownership, the media ownership in our country, they usually divide it into two: public and private media ownership. We are not talking about public media ownership because we know they are what? They are press singers of the government, of our leaders. But what about the private media that are seen as neutral? They are seen as what? As those who are impartial, who will discharge this duty accordingly. But they too, the truth of the matter is, many media organizations and many veteran journalists in our country, they are on the payroll of the government. So tell me, how can they discharge that function given to them by Section 22 of holding the government responsible? We know the media in our state or in our system is the fourth estate of the realm after the executive, legislature, and judicial arm of government. Media is the fourth. It has the power to check their excesses. But what is our media doing? What is our journalists doing in discharging this responsibility? So here, both the system and the people have failed us. So what is the way forward? What is the way out? Prof has categorically stated in his presentation, is there in the slide, that he puts most of the blame on the people, which I quite agree with him. And when we put the blame of the people, we are not saying that our leaders must be infallible, they must be perfect, they must be angels. No, we all know that we have good people in our midst. Now it is left for us to find these good people, these honorable people, and force them, whether they like it or not, force them. At the first discussion talks about joining partisan politics, which in this condition, in this situation, is something which we must do it. We must bring in good people into the system. We know them, we identify them, bring them in, support them, and make sure they are our leaders. The qualities of leadership, if they are stated in the slide presented by our presenter. So it is left for us to have people who will be mobilizers and organizers, people who will be strategists, people who will identify good people from among ourselves and make them, post them, convince them, persuade them to join this partisan politics, support them with everything we can, with our money, with our energy, with our time and everything. I think this is the only way forward which we can solve our leadership crisis. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Malam Anas, for this contribution, and may Allah reward you abundantly. So due to the time factor, I don't know if among the audience, if there is any comment or questions. I saw Dr. Said Dukawa, I think he's a friend to our prof. If he's still around, I know he's a very resourceful person. He can go ahead.
He is a political scientist, a world-class political commentator. He is my leader in the Triple IT, and also he is my predecessor in the academia, and so on and so forth. Please invite him to say a word or two. He's there, unless if he has left.
So, Prof. Said Dukawa, if you are still around, the floor is open. You can go ahead to make your contribution, sir.
I think he has left.
Yes, I saw he has left before. I don't know, maybe he has a network issue. So from the audience, if there is any comment or questions, please you can go ahead.
Okay.
There was a question in the chat box.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a question in the chat box. Someone asked, without Taye asked, please, sir, what is the role of Muslim women in leadership? Thank you for the presentation. That was the question. What is the role of Muslim women in leadership?
Okay, this is the question, Prof.
Yeah, I think I saw the question actually, and this is a question that has always been recurring. And from now, it is very clear to us from the nusus and from the opinions expressed by Muslim scholars across generations that there is no difference of opinion, or you can say a near consensus regarding the fact that women can hold positions of public responsibility. They can, hold on to positions of responsibility in the public on different aspects of life. But the only thing that scholars sharply differ is about two things: whether women can actually be judges in the Sharia court, and whether they can, occupy the position of top leadership, the topmost position, or the position of an overall leader. That is the Amirul Mu'minin, for example. This is where there are differing opinions. But then other positions of responsibility in public can be held by women, and women can partake in processes of, producing leaders, whatever that would mean, as long as that they do not violate the Islamic rules regarding hijab and public conduct of women. They can partake in political situations. That's why we allow our women to go and cast their votes. And in that same way, they can occupy positions in political parties, and so on and so forth. And they can vie for positions in the parliament, and so on and so forth. They can do all that. Like I said, the controversy, the difference in opinion among scholars is on the topmost position of leadership and whether they can become judges in the Sharia court. And these are issues that are still, being discussed by scholars. And up to this moment, there is no consensus opinion regarding that. The hadith reported by Abu Bakrata, Fay'u ibn al-Harith al-Saqafi, in which the Prophet ﷺ says, nations that are led by women, by a woman, would never prosper. This is hadith that scholars have subjected it to various interpretations and explanations, which the time will not permit to present all those. Volumes and volumes of books have been written on this. Some scholars have even gone ahead to try to reject the hadith, or to say that the hadith is more authentic. But certainly the hadith is very much authentic. Maybe we need to further study the views of scholars, and also to further, try to deepen our thoughts on what the Prophet ﷺ actually meant on that. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Malama Amina is like Suleiman Ahmad Manjo is raising his hand. So can you kindly unmute yourself to ask the question?
Thank you very much. The question is about women in this leadership, and it was answered.
So Alhamdulillah. So do we have any further question or comment or contributions?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Prof, thank you for the good presentation. I want to ask question. If you look at Nigeria and the Nigerians now, of course, the leadership is very bad in Nigeria. But the issue is we, the followers, even the scholars who are here, have it in their mind that if they go back to Nigeria, they don't want Nigeria to become okay until they have their own share and what have you. Now, are we to continue abusing our leaders for bringing leadership crisis, or we are to pray for them? Because what I'm seeing here in Malaysia, if you go to any congregational prayer, they used to pray for their leaders. And Malaysia is one of the countries in the world that has good leadership. So that's my question. Are we to continue accusing, abusing our leaders for their bad things, or else we should continue praying for them? That's the question.
Generally, scholars have prevented us, have warned us against cursing our leaders or insulting them. And we have been encouraged as much as possible to pray for our leaders. Even if such leaders are obviously doing wrong, we should continue to pray for them, because praying for leaders is praying for the good of the society. And it doesn't earn anything for a person if he insults leaders or he curses them. In fact, it may earn him the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because sometimes you may curse a leader or insult him, but you may not be in a position to know the reasons why he partook certain decisions or he failed to do certain things. You wouldn't be in a position to know that. I'm not saying that we should always give leaders unlimited excuses, but you see, the situation is far, far deeper than we think. When you find yourself in a position of leadership, you will realize that it is sometimes very difficult to take certain decisions, or certain decisions may be very unpopular with people. But you have to take those decisions even though they are unpopular. And then you cannot even come out to tell people why you took those decisions. Because the fitna that may come when you release the explanations, the fitna that may come can only be imagined. So you may find yourself in a position whereby you may take a decision that is very, very unpopular with people, and because of the fitna, you cannot even explain to people why you took that decision. You just have to keep mute and to entertain the insults and the abuses and to tolerate them. But you cannot come out and explain. There are situations like that. Leadership is a very difficult matter, and leaders have information at their disposal where people, followers, do not have, a fraction, the smallest fraction of that information. Because leaders have information coming to them from different sources and from different layers of the society. And sometimes they place all this information in front of them to take a decision. And you wouldn't know what considerations they make to take those decisions. So there are a lot of, intricate matters and complex issues in leadership. So the issue is we must, concentrate more on in praying for leaders rather than insulting them. And if we know the hadith of Al-Muflis, Atadruna man al-Muflis, you see, some of us may become muflisun by insulting leaders we would not know. When you insult a person, on the day of judgment, it is from your deeds, good deeds, that he will be rewarded of the insults. So you don't have right to insult leaders or to curse them. Sometimes when you curse them or you insult them, they may have excuses before Allah which you don't know. And you will just bear the burden of insulting them, the sin of insulting them. So we have to be careful. But then, this does not and should not close the door of constructive criticism to leaders. Constructive criticisms, mature advice, and private advice. We must concentrate more on giving private advice. If a person has a window through which he can present one advice or the other to leaders, he should not come out public and insult those leaders. He should use that window to be advising the leaders. They may take one, they may not take 10. Out of 10, they may take only one, and they may not take 10 of the advice one may give. But that one should not abandon that opportunity. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallahu khairan, Prof. And with this, we have come to the end of the talk. I most appreciate our able professor for honoring our invitation and for making this a very educative and informative presentation. I can see Akiwalu is raising his hand. The lecture is a thought-provoking one. There must be some questions that will arise and contributions, but unfortunately here we are fast approaching Salat period, that is the Maghrib period, so we are limited by that. I would like to thank all participants for attending the session, as well as the discussant for sparing their times to be with us. Wajazakumullahu khair. May Allah reward everyone with Jannatul Firdaus. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So we will share the slides, inshallah, in due course. Jazakumullahu khair.
Thank you very much, sir. Jazakumullahu khair.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you, everybody who took time to be part of the program. We hope that you will be available for the next edition, inshallah, next month. Jazakallah khairan. May Allah bless us and guide us and protect us and spare us beyond the next session. So with this, we come to the end of the program. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay, bisalam.
Thank you, Prof. May Allah bless your every success.
Ameen. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor. Allah reward you abundantly and discussant also.